Dearest humans, hello. It's so good to see you all. Welcome to our 228th online gathering. This blows my circuits for faith leaders across the country. Thank you, Jason and Jill, for midwifing this space and nurturing it. Oh my gosh, through 228 gatherings. The space now called Creating Beloved Community. This regular gathering is sponsored by ELCA's coaching ministry. I am Reverend Solveig Nilsson Gooden. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm honored to be one of your facilitators today.
And y'all know me. I'm Jason O'Neill. I use any and all pronouns. I'm humbled to be your other facilitator today. In attunement with the truth and healing movement of the ELCA and moving toward right relationship with our Indigenous siblings and neighbors, let us begin with a land acknowledgement. We are gathered together from all parts of Turtle Island, also referred to as North America. We are connected by the breath, given us by the breath maker, and by the very peace of Mother Earth, the land that each of us inhabits today. We understand that all land is Indigenous land, and we invite each of you to name in the chat the Indigenous peoples or tribal nations whose lands you occupy now. We acknowledge the terror of colonialism, genocide, ethnic cleansing, broken treaties, stolen land, forced removal, and boarding schools, as well as the thousands of missing and murdered Indigenous women and children each year, and the ripple effects of violence still being experienced today. We know that Indigenous peoples are not historical subjects, but are part of our communities, and they offer invaluable wisdom for how we exist in relationship with Mother Earth, as well as our human and non-human neighbors. Oh, Sylvia, you're muted.
Thank you so much. It's also important for us to offer a labor acknowledgement. So with permission granted by Tara Stewart, Dr. Tara Stewart, we acknowledge that much of what we know of this country today, including its culture, economic growth, and development, has been made possible by the labor of enslaved Africans and their ascendants who suffered the horror of transatlantic trafficking, slavery, and Jim Crow laws. We are indebted to their labor and their sacrifice, and we acknowledge the tremors of that violence throughout the generations and the resulting impact that can still be felt and witnessed today.
Another vital part of creating beloved community is fostering a sense of belonging. So we invite you to update your name in Zoom to include your pronouns. This is just one more way we can express welcome for all of God's children. And at any point during the gatherings, you may access captions options in the Zoom menu on your device. It might also show as an icon with the letters CC in a box, or you may need to click on 3 little dots or swipe to a different screen within Zoom to access the option, depending on your device. So let us continue our work toward healing and justice by entering into a place of peace and listening together. Through these regular gatherings, we have developed a covenant of how we enter and interact in this space. We are committed to creating a safer and braver space where each of us are able to bring the truth of who we are and how we are doing. If you share something today you wish for us to edit out of the recording, just let us know afterwards. And with all of this said, we affirm these conversations are meant to be an intentional step to live more fully into God's dream for us as the body of Christ, the beloved community.
As Bell Hooks wrote in All About Love, rarely, if ever, are any of us healed in isolation. Healing is an act of communion. So thanks for being in communion with us today.
And so today and every second Wednesday of 2025, we will journey with Indigenous author Vine Deloria Jr. and engage with his book, Custer Died for Your Sins, an Indian Manifesto. Today is chapter 5, by the way. A reminder about our journey together. We are all learning from this Indigenous elder through his writing. So Sylvia and I are not teaching. We're just facilitators of this space each month. And it feels important to begin our reading circle each month with this context from the last paragraph of the preface. But the Indian task of keeping an informed public available to assist the tribes in their efforts to survive is never ending. And so the central message of this book, that Indians are alive, have certain dreams of their own, and are being overrun by the ignorance and the mistaken, misdirected efforts of those who would help them, can never be repeated too often.
Excuse me. We also have a covenant that we have agreed to hold this space and the practices that we have here. If you missed the first session, I invite you to watch the recording on the ELCA coaching website for a more in-depth introduction to this covenant and our pedagogy. But in sum, we agree in this space to share from our head and our heart. This is not just an intellectual exercise that we're participating in. This is a transformative process. And so we share from our heads and our hearts. I invite you to practice awareness of space and time. We have a sweet hour together, and so we want everybody to be able to have the chance to speak to the extent that they are interested in wanting to do that. So we just need to be aware that we have a limited amount of time together, and we want to just really allow each of us to inhabit that time as fully as possible. So that may mean stepping up or stepping back. So if you're a person that kind of holds back, we invite you to find the courage to step forward and bring your voice into this conversation so that it can be fuller for all of us. And if you're a person that tends to really feel comfortable sharing and take up a fair amount of space and time, just be aware of that and then step back a little bit if need be. So we're always learning in this process, and so we can learn from the process, we can learn from the content, we can learn from our own inner responses that are happening. We're all learning, and that's the whole point. So I invite you to be courageous and brave together in this space. So I believe, here we go. Yep. How we have begun this space is that we have all, the invitation was to read for this month, chapter 5 of this book. And so we're going to take a few minutes of silence and give you a chance to go through that chapter in your book. And if it's anything like mine, 3/4 of it is underlined. And so we invite you to pick out maybe 1 or 2 really cogent quotes that just spoke something powerful to you. I invite you to put those in the chat. And then after a few minutes, we're going to ask each person to read their quote. And so we can hear the quotes in your own voices. Okay. So if you do that, we also invite you to put the page number of the quote so that we can all look it up at the same time. So we'll just have a few minutes, 3 minutes or so of silence, and go ahead and populate the chat with those quotes, and then we'll start reading them. Just about one more minute, and then Tammy, I'll invite you to start because you're the first quote that I can see, at least on the chat. So maybe just give another 30 seconds or so for folks to finish up any quotes that they want to add, and then you can jump in.
An old Indian once told me that when the missionaries arrived, they fell on their knees and prayed. Then they got up, fell on the Indians, and prayed.
Stephanie, would you read your quote?
Indian beliefs have always retained the capacity to return from their exile because they have always related to the Indians' deepest concern. Indian religion required a personal commitment to act.
Jill, I see yours next.
From page 102, land acquisition and missionary work always went hand in hand in American history. And I'll just tag on to that. That just screams of Old Testament Israelites moving into different land, and it makes my stomach squishy, friends.
On page 105, missionaries looked at the feats of the medicine men and proclaimed them to be works of the devil. They overlooked the fact that medicine men were able to do marvelous things. Above all, they overlooked the fact that what the Indian medicine men did worked.
And from page 119, religion formerly held an important place in Indian tribal life. It integrated the functions of tribal society so that life was experienced as a unity. Christianity has proved to be a disintegrating force. Religion today, or at least Christianity, does not provide the understanding with which society makes sense, nor does it provide any means by which the life of the individual has value. Christianity fights unreal crises, which it creates by its fascinations with its own abstractions.
And on page 118, no other field of endeavor in America today has as much blatant racial discrimination as does the field of Christian missionaries to the American Indian people.
On page 104, the Reformation had divided the world into arenas, church and state. Morality of one was not necessarily related to morality in the other.
Page 120. In Indian religions, regardless of the tribe, death is a natural occurrence and not a special punishment from an arbitrary god. Indian people do not try to reason themselves out of their grief, nor do they try to make a natural but sad event an occasion for probing the rationale of whatever reality exists beyond ourselves.
Page 121, it says the greatest difference between the Native people and the organized Christian church is in interpersonal relationships.
And so maybe my quote that I just put relates both to what Jack just read and also Leslie's page 124. I believe an Indian version of Christianity could do much for our society.
I had put down both pages 102 and 104, but I think the second one, exploitation of one's fellows by any means, becomes a religious exercise, which seems so apropos to 2025. But the commodification, I thought, was just, it's I think now we kind of think of commodification in Christianity as if you're doing well financially, then that's because God has blessed you. And if you're not, that's because God has not blessed you, rather than commodification has nothing to do with it.
You mind, Leslie, if I read your first part? Because I feel like it also relates to everything. Yeah, from page 102. Christianity destroyed many Indian religious practices by offering a much easier and much more practical religion. Oh, Mukesh, I just saw you added. Would you like to read yours loud?
Sure. Earth, the belief was mother of all, page 103. As a former Hindu, Mother Earth, we pray to Mother Earth, thanking God for God's creation. And so that kind of resonated with me.
Wow. There's a lot here. Thank you for reading the quotes in your own voices. I really appreciated hearing your voices. So now we open up, we go deeper. I invite you to whether it's from the quotes that have been shared, or whether there's more, I invite you to share whatever is coming to your heart. But I'm especially curious in this chapter, just the impact. How did this chapter impact you? Your faith, your relationship with Christianity. But take it wherever your heart leads.
I was kind of dismayed by the quote, not that the quote that Leslie put up first, and not that Leslie put it up, but actually the words that Christianity destroyed Indian religious practices. It's so a much easier and more practical religion, which in the way it's often practiced is true, but that's not really true. It's not true of Jesus, and that's why I often tell people that being an ELCA Lutheran is difficult, because there are no easy answers. There's only gray, and a lot of maybe missionary Christianity, maybe colonizing forms of Christianity are very easy, black and white, sin and salvation and stuff, which is why the two quotes that I shared were about the natural connection between culture and faith that has become overprocessed in a lot of Christianity, where the pastor tries to tell you not to cry because the person's in a better place. And that's just makes no sense. And the Indian religion relates to their deepest concern. It actually addresses real things and doesn't try to put a processed religion on top of real life experience with the spiritual world.
There is a practical example from page 112. The white Christian church or so wants to keep congregations in mission status. The first thought that came was, from what I just heard, that Christianity is not a religion. Christianity is a faith practice and a way of living and a way of walking through the earth. Most people, well, no, many don't understand that. So we white people, myself and others like me, I should say, put so much onus on organization, we turn it into a religion. Page 112, God's timing has always been perfect. The moment I walked into a parsonage on the Dakota Oyate Lutheran Church, it's on the Spirit Lake Reservation in North Dakota. I was there to be to serve the people. At that very moment, I entered the center of the parsonage. A man came out dressed in a nice suit with a suitcase in his hand. He looked at me and he put the suitcase down. And he said, you must be Pastor Jack. I said, yes, I am. I said, are you the former pastor leaving? He said, yes, I am. And without a moment's hesitation, he lifted up his hand and he pointed his finger in a semicircle in front of him. And he said, all those people on this reservation are children. And you have to treat them like they're children. I have tried for 8-10 years to convince them to stop going to dances and to put away their drums and to not speak their Sioux language and to come to church and be baptized and become Christian, but they won't listen.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing that. That's a hard story to hear.
So something that got my attention, and forgive me, but I didn't read. I just, as you were talking, I just skimmed through here quickly. But some of the thing that caught my attention was on page 105, and I think, at least for me, it applies to us today. It says here, most activity centered on teaching and preaching. The thrust was to get the Indians to memorize the Large Catechism, the Small Catechism, the Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed, the Ten Commandments, and the other magic rites and formulas dear to Christianity. Salvation became a matter of regurgitation of creeds. In a very real sense, then, Christianity replaced living religions with magic. And why it stood out for me is, I don't know, but again, it seems like we are still doing it. We are forcing people to memorize the creed and the Ten Commandments and whatever we do for confirmation to affirm their one's baptism and stamp it as a certificate without understanding or helping that it is not something to memorize, but to live with. I have to mute myself. My daughter's calling.
That's what struck me, is that what we were doing to them that was bad was not good for us either. And I pondered a lot on that, the Reformation being church and state, but when they were together, that wasn't a good thing either. So, and then that put me into how today with Christian nationalism. So it just made me ponder a lot on how the things that we are doing that are not good, we're also destroying ourselves.
Just in the next paragraph that you quoted, Mukesh, on 105, the end of that paragraph says, then the natural tendency by some Indian people was to adopt the white religion of recitation and forego the rigors of fasting, sacrifice, and prayer. right? You've got a whole culture, right, that's actually rigorous about maturation, spiritual, emotional, relational, right? Like, and there's like so many structures, like there's an integrated whole that's like supporting the maturation of humans. And it's not easy, right? Right? To mature is not easy, right? And then you get this other religion that's forced. So Jason and I were talking about this earlier, like there were so many reasons to take upon Christianity. One is that like these people have guns and resources and are actually like destroying things. So it might be a survival mechanism, right? To survive. There might be material benefit that comes from it. And I mean, many other things. I'd be curious what else people think about that. But including, well, if I don't have to like fast and do these big long, rituals and, have my nipples pierced in the Sundance ritual and, you know what I mean? Like deep, deep work. But if I just can memorize a few things and then I'm good, sweet. But it keeps everybody, including us, I think you were just saying this, including us, like so immature. So that really, a lot of what you all have said has really struck me about that.
It reminds me of when Paul's writing about spiritual food and kind of infant food. And I was thinking kind of why I use the word processed. It's a processed religion because it's made to be more consistent and easily digestible, but not nourishing.
Mm.
Whereas the things you have to, chew, kale, like fasting is like eating kale because it's really good for you, but it's really hard work and it doesn't always taste good.
It'd be a fun thing for us to do at some point. Like, what's the metaphor for the processed food, right? Is it the Velveeta? Is Christianity the Velveeta of the food chain, right? Or what? Spam?
I think it might be the American processed cheese slices, like it's worse than Velveeta.
Wrapped in plastic.
Well, my kid this morning was just talking about different kinds of chicken nuggets, and he actually I think he used whipped chicken. He's like, I don't like those ones that are like whipped chicken. And I was like, I think that's the word is processed, but I get what you're saying.
So I am hoping that I'm not speaking out of term here, but is it that the people make Christianity the way it is being presented, or is it Christianity on behalf of Christ's teaching? Because I know from different perspective and different Christian, growing up from, obviously I'm different in that sense. We are committed not, and that's one of the trouble I still processing, to use that word, is which part of Christ you don't get. Because that's not Christianity, that memorizing the 10 Commandments and Apostles' Creed, great, you know that, but we talked about head to heart to hands. Which part of Christianity are we really and missioning, if you will?
And Mukesh, if I can jump in right behind you, my friend, that truly is a huge struggle for me, this usurping of land and marching across the country and white people saying, yeah, that looks really nice, now it's mine. And this is not that different than what the people of God were called to do in the Old Testament. And I've had this conversation with a lot of people. And if someone can help me understand the theology behind that part of God's story, I would really appreciate it, because I can't explain it to people in a way that makes sense. And goodness knows those stories have been used to back up super awful, atrocious behavior for years. So I'm waiting for your wisdom of the crowd. Here, go. I hear crickets, Solveig. That's what I'm hearing.
Well, I actually I'm going to take that piece to a conversation with my friend who grew up Lakota and Lutheran, and converted to Judaism, and has deep understanding and deep struggle with this exact point. And I'm not, there's not an easy answer.
This is kind of related, but not directly to the readings. The Minneapolis Area Synod had a memorial that they presented for the missing and murdered Indigenous peoples. And there's an article that I just sent to Jason that maybe he can put in the link, that I thought was really well written, and I felt like I missed the opportunity to speak on behalf of them in that process. I think, Stephanie, you were in the assembly as well. Someone spoke up regarding, well, wouldn't we be better off looking for not just Indigenous, but all of the women type of thing. And the point is that the point is, again, it's all about all of us. It's not about them. It's not recognizing their suffering. It's not recognizing what we've done to create that suffering. And it was just such a missed opportunity. And I have to say that after I read it last night, I had a hard time sleeping, thinking about how could I spoke to that? What could have I constructed that would have been a response that would have helped to be an education, not to condemn the person who said what they said, but to support the Indigenous people and for the work that they were doing to help us to learn. So.
Yeah, Kelly posted on Facebook about that shortly after it happened. And I was sitting there because somebody had basically, it was a, all lives matter kind of thing. And I thought, no, somebody has to, I have to say something against this. And I thought, well, that's just, people, it's so ridiculous that everybody knows that. And in the end, the vote made it clear that everybody knew that. And Kelly said, yeah, but nobody stood up for us. Nobody backed us up. And that's what hurt. No matter who knew, everyone knew, but no one would say. And and she said, and that's honestly where lots of good-hearted, good-natured allies fall, is in the speaking up on things that everyone knows.
Jill, you asked for the wisdom of the group. That's where you lost me, because I kept my mute on.
Oh.
Okay. Point 1, point 2. This is not you. I'm talking in general. People will raise an issue like that. How could God do blank, blank, blank? And when they say, give me an answer, in a sense, the wrong question is, give me an easy answer that will make all the pain go away and make everything clear. See, that's the wrong question, because there are issues like what you raised. There is no easy answer, and nobody can resolve all your pain, because you should have pain. All of us should have pain when we look at some of the scriptures and we look at history. I think that's the human reality. I want to add one thing also, though. Towards the very close, page 124. He does not say, like, the greatest thing in the world between Native people and non-Native or white and such would be to have a Christian version of Indian religion. He said, to have an Indian version of Christianity. To me, that is a massive tone he's trying to set. He doesn't want us to turn everybody white. He's saying we can accept that, but we are first Native people. So to look for it, and he, by religion, he does not mean the rules and regs, of course, but he means a way of life. Because the way it's been explained to me so often by people far wiser and older than I am, that the Native way was never a religion. It was a path through life. And that the whites, unfortunately, they built a pyramid. And they said on top are the priests and the pastors, the popes, and down here at the bottom are us common people. And they say the Native way is a circle, that all are on the hoop. Some are leaders, of course, but all are to be respected. I would imagine, fine, if I'm not offending you, that he would find to put the finest points of Jesus into the Native way of faith. I think he would find that wonderful. Say, I do remember the one who sort of oversees this whole program of the ELCA. I asked him several months ago, would Jesus make a good Indian? And he said, yes. Well,
And Jack, thank you for starting your response the way that you did. That helps me shift my expectation. And that's also revelatory of the white supremacy, like living in me and flowing out of me. Like, let's go, kids, quick, easy answer, remove I feel uncomfortable here, right? And so I think it's also important to name that, especially in this space when we're doing this intentional work. And so I can live with that. Jack, I may need to call you often to have you re-say this to my face. So please be on tap and be ready for that. But the other thing I want to say is what Jack just talked about is exactly how I experienced Jesus. And that is Jesus being willing to meet me wherever I'm at. That there's nothing sacrilegious about what Jack just said. That is the Jesus that I know. And I'm not, and in saying that, I'm not saying, and therefore that's Jesus and total, right? Just prefacing here, but this is very helpful. Thank you.
Jesus led more in a circle. I mean, he was a humble leader. There wasn't that pyramid if we actually look at the Jesus movement.
Well, on the question, would Jesus make a good Indian? It's like, well, was Jesus not an Indigenous person in his context? I kind of think so, and that makes a lot of sense to me. he was in a colonized context, an Indigenous person in a colonized context. So yeah, who can read the Gospels with more clarity than Indigenous people?
So I think, Sylvia, you said something earlier, but this obviously take more than an hour, but I'm just wondering, how do people read this stuff and deal with the realities of life right now and still go to church? But one of the churches, my husband and I, he's Presbyterian and I'm United Methodist, and we attend a Presbyterian church, United Methodist Church. And the United Methodist Church is native. It changed from a white church to it's open to everyone, but the pastor's Cherokee, and he's been there for 8 years, I think. And I would say half the congregation, at least every morning, is native. Some of whom hadn't been connected to the Christian church before. And there's that kind of, how do we do the drumming and this and the different languages, and obviously each person there, as well as persons from each native nation, are going to experience it differently. So that's been helpful for me, but just in general, just looking, every time I read something or hear something new or old, it's kind of like, am I just becoming more and more a part of or staying part of the oppressors, I guess, against, rather than an ally. So, anyway.
I was just going to comment, Leslie, to your first part, that when Sylvia and I were prepping for today, right before this, she was like, we need a whole year just on this chapter. Like, as far as all the stuff that, yeah, we could unpack just on chapter 5.
Seed planted. We've just got a few more minutes before we start wrapping up. What else is on your heart to say into this space, this brave space that we've created here?
I wonder if maybe, like, there were a couple questions in the discussion guide for this chapter. I'm curious if maybe one of those questions might be. The one that jumps out right now is, what can Christians learn from Indigenous ways of life and spirituality? Versus, the other way around, how we go in with missions.
I think the sacredness of the whole is a component. I mean, I think we say it, but I don't think we live it. So, and I think that's the difference. I mean, it's not that that's something that's uniquely not spoken in or that it's not spoken in our context, but I think we could do a better job of living it, and that would be a way in which the Indigenous people, that's their nature.
I'm really thinking about the circle again, and versus the pyramid. And the other thing that I'm thinking about the circle is that sometimes people are not able to stand, physically, emotionally, mentally, and those people get placed inside the circle where they are protected and lifted up and provided for. And there's just so much to that. I'm going to use that symbol around my office to help me stay centered in this. So thank you, friends, for this discussion.
much like the circle in another context in which I'm a part of, that as we're talking about the concept of beloved community, we are using a web as a symbol. And so I just throw that into the process of thinking about the ways in which there are these places of connection, and these that we're all in this horizontal leadership, but we all are contributing to the whole.
I think one other piece was from a quote that I think maybe Stephanie, maybe it was one you shared. I can't remember exactly who shared it, but just about like seeing life as life, and life includes death, and that doesn't have to be a problem. We don't have to make any statement about, well, this was God's will, it wasn't God's will. We have to make it into God's will, even if it was some horrible, awful, terrible thing. It's just like, why? We just don't, why? We don't have to do that. It's just like death, part of life. Like it's just as normal as anything. And it all seems to be just strategies for not feeling the pain of grief. That is also just part of life. So I would love to incorporate that as part of Christianity. I just feel like there's a lot of suffering because of that framework.
That ties in with Mother Earth and the whole connection of birth and death. It's part of this cycle.
I think we are about at time, but I think I might have, oh, here we go. I got my stuff now. So we're going to do a closing in just a minute, but we can take a few minutes to just share. Let's just take a minute and breathe and to share what was powerful about today. What is going to be alive and living within you as we go from here.
I'm going to take the web with me.
I'm taking hope with me that there are other people asking hard questions, and we're not trying to find easy answers, or like the white way. Like I don't want the white way. I want us to be intentional about beloved community.
Yeah, I'm also realizing, along with what Jason said, that in trying to take the easy way, we overcomplicate things. So the following Jesus is simple, but it's not easy.
And that suffering is a part of that.
Another takeaway is that I'm looking at 8 boxes, and the conversation we just had would not have happened 30 years ago when I walked on among the native people. It would have been impossible. At least that gives me a quiver of hope, Jason and Jill, that you are doing something that enables us to do this. that would not have been possible the last generation. So I thank you too. And I thank the ELCA.
I was reminded of the, it's not memorizing, it's not commodifying. And I am curious what's happening in seminaries now, because when I look back, there was lots of memorizing and pushback. I mean, I was in seminary a long time ago, but pushback from professors when you wanted to do things a little bit differently. I just wanted to say that I'm going to a annual Vine Deloria Jr. Indigenous Studies Symposium that's held in Bellingham, Washington, at Western Washington. It's been there for, I don't know, 20 years maybe. So that's happening this week. I'm kind of watching the site for the one in Chicago to see what's happening there in the future.
I just want to share one of the things I'm taking away is that because of something that Leslie said, we figured out that we're actually neighbors. Like we live like a half a mile away from each other. So we are going to get together at some point. We are actually literally like building beloved community right here.
That is the hope.
It's awesome.
I hate to bring us to a close, but I want to make sure we end well. Thank you for actively creating beloved community with us. We do it with each of you and can't do it without you. With an objective of healing together, right? We have our own healing to do too. There are a number of events this month supporting our learning with and from Indigenous peoples. So we invite you to continue your learning if you are able. Those can all be found on the events page for ELCA coaching. Sylvie just threw that link in the chat, but I want to highlight a few things real quick. Tomorrow, White Lutherans for Racial Justice and ELCA Racial Justice Ministries invite us to join them for resourcing for remembering the Emmanuel 9. Next week, you can join us back in this space for creating beloved community. Nobody journeys alone. There are 2 modules this month on moving toward right relations with Indigenous people. That's offered by the Coalition to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery. There are those 2 on the calendar as well. Next Thursday, join ELCA Indigenous Ministries and Tribal Relations for a conversation with the family of Aubrey Dameron, one of the many missing Indigenous women. And then on May 25th, for those in or near Minneapolis, ELCA Racial Justice Ministries and ELCA African Descent Ministries invites us to join them for the 5th Angelversary of George Floyd. That's only in person. There's not an online version. And our next reading circle gathering on chapter 6 will be the second Wednesday next month. That's on June 11th. Thank you, Solveig, for throwing all those links in the chat. And it was like
there were a lot of links. I'm like, wow, Jason. Okay, there's a lot going on. That's amazing. So friends, as you leave here today, please remember that you are seen, that you are valued, and that you're loved. We're learning together. It's a beautiful thing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Solveig and Jason, for this time. God bless you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Go in peace. Look forward to connecting, Leslie.